Hello everybody and welcome back to my channel. This is another painting exercise with watercolor. We're gonna paint today this picture that I found as a royalty-free photographs on the internet. I'm going to put the link below, so if you would like to paint along with me, you can find the reference as well. Let's talk about the materials that we need. I got a piece of paper. This is Fabriano paper. I buy these large size papers and then I cut them down to size. This is about 25 centimeters by 35. I think this is the best way to buy paper. It's the more convenient for sure. A pencil, this is just a regular Koh-i-Noor B pencil, and as per usual a series of waterproof pens and markers. I have a 0.1, 0.5, and this one is a sort of a rollerball type of pen with a little bit of a line variation. An eraser, of course, some brushes, and I use my number 12 Raphael brush, a number 3 mop brush, and then a very thin fine line number 2 brush. And then some masking tape. I use this to pin my page down. This helps very much, especially if you're using lighter paper. And of course our watercolor. The watercolor that we are going to use today are a combination of blues. I generally use French ultramarine and some cerulean blue. These are from Sennelier. A combination of yellow, cadmium yellow deep, cadmium yellow and lemon yellow. We have some ochre, yellow ochre, and then perhaps, of course, PN gray and a sap green. So let's get started.
So hopefully this works out. I just got a new microphone and we'll see how it works. I'm here outlining the line for the horizon and the line of the wall in our reference photo. And as you can see, they are a little bit slanted. I'm using my pencil very lightly because I don't like erasing too much after the drawing is done. When I'm happy with the horizon line and the main lines of the painting, I start drawing the mountains that you see on the background. It's not a perfect drawing, but try to follow more or less our image and where we want to crop it. It's time then to fill in with the main shapes, and I'm working here on the outline of the boat and the very big shapes on the boat. I will focus on the particulars of the boat later on. I'm just trying to give the boat itself, the main object, a little bit of a shape in the space of the page, and as well trying to follow the perspective. It helps very much to outline some of the details like the cabin or the railings to have a better idea of the size of the ship or the size of the main object as well of the perspective lines. Once again, keep your pencil very light. That will definitely help once you are outlining the painting with ink. When I am happy with my drawing in pencil, I started the inking process. And this is quite terrifying because the marks on the page are indelible. So it's very easy to make some mistakes. To avoid mistakes, I tend to ink quite loosely and starting with a finer point and growing in size later on when I'm more sure what I want to represent on the page. You see me changing size and pen quite often during the whole inking process. I have lately figured out that I do prefer having stronger border of the main subjects rather than the outline of the particular parts of the building, meaning the vest, the railings, or the little windows. And applies to building sketching, urban sketching, literally anywhere I have to use ink to outline my painting. I know that some people prefer to sketch directly in ink, and that probably will give you a little bit of an organic feeling to your painting. I just find it quite terrifying, and I do prefer to start with the pencil sketching. These pens that I'm using have a waterproof ink, means that the ink resists to water. So then on the next step, when we are adding watercolor and layers of water on the top of it, I do like to get my ink to stick to the page without smudging. As you can see, I'm adding the final touches here. Something that I've learned in these few years of watercolor sketching and urban sketching is to just very lightly outline the very further background and give suggestions. Like here, I'm just suggesting the woods, the trees with a little squiggly line. And you can notice this technique as well in the stones and the bricks of the wall. Without really drawing every single brick, I just outline where they are. When the inking stage is done, I just let the painting or the drawing rest for a few seconds before putting on water. This allows the ink to dry a little bit better. I'm starting here with one layer of ultramarine blue, and the thing that I want to achieve is a very uniform grading wash. So I'm dumping literally a lot of color, pigment, and water on the very top of my painting. And with a clean brush, now I'm just lifting the color and dragging it down quite slowly so that the water melt and merge within itself and creates this little grade type of situation that I like very much in my skies. It's literally a clean brush with some water and pulling the paint from that very first very dark, very pigmented line on the top all the way down to the end of my sky. I do like to leave a little bit of white border on the bottom and adding some yellow ochre to merge into the blue so that we can suggest the light of the sky and the sun coming into play with the blueness of the sky itself. Don't worry if this looks very dark, it will lighten up later on. Now, using one of my cadmium reds with a teeny tiny touch of blue, I am going to fill in the body of the ship. And once again here, I am trying to create a flat wash of paint. So plenty of water and dragging this little bubble that forms of water all the way down to the surface that I want to cover. And I will probably end up going over and over this flat wash a little bit later with different shades of color, adding some blue or some of my gray in order to give a little bit more depth. But for now, the important part is actually to create the flat wash of paint. This is kind of my signature when it comes to watercolor. I do like them to fill in wide flat areas in order to create a bit of depth later on with other tones, other values, and so on. Now, it's quite important to stay within the margins of your drawing. If you decide to go out of the margins, this may create some interesting situations of your painting. It's not quite my style, but I see the value of being a little bit more painterly. But in this case, we're just recording a little tutorial for a basic drawing. And the techniques that I want to teach you are really based on flat washes and creating depth out of those. Now, with a mix of blue, cadmium red, and a tiny bit of gray, I am creating this interesting warm gray that I will use for both the bottom part of my boat and as well later on for the walls and the main shadows. Now, having both blue and red into a gray will allow you to change the color between a warmer gray and a colder gray as you feel like. As you can see from the painting here, the first part or the top part of the bottom of the boat has much more red in it. The middle part has much more blue. And then as I go towards the outer part, the bottom part of the paint, I add more and more red. So it creates a little bit of a give of cold and hot, cold and warm gray, which brings some interest in our painting and as well, once again, a little bit of variation and depth. Now, let's mix some of that sap green with a little bit of gray and a tiny, tiny bit of blue as well. We want a very cold, very flat green. And this is the best green for any background. If you don't have a sap green in your palette, I really recommend it. It is probably my favorite green to create a natural feeling. Once again, don't worry if the color seems very dark, very bright. This will tone down after the paint has dried. This is one of the tricks of watercolors. So start with a bit more pigment that you think you wouldn't need, and then you have always time to add more. But when it dries, it's literally going to fade down a lot. Now, as you can see, I'm adding to my base green some blue and some yellow as I go, in order once again to create the feeling of depth on those hills on the background. And I'm adding quite a bit of blue the closer I get to the front of the cliff, the front of the background, and adding more yellow and diluting the color more as I go further and closer to the top of the sky or the further down of the painting. Now, a trick that I use all the time is to segment my painting and let stuff dry before I go on with a second layer or something that is close to another part. Like in this example, I painted the sky first and then I went on with the boat, and then while the sky have fully dried, now I'm painting the cliffs which are adjacent to the sky, and the color this way doesn't smudge with each other, doesn't melt, and it creates a flat and nice separation between the two. Once again, I'm trying to have a flat wash, so plenty of water and dragging those bubbles down as I go. With the same idea of painting in zones, so now I am painting right by the boat, by that red that we just layered down, but that had the full potential to dry very well, so the paint doesn't smudge. I'm using some yellow ochre to highlight a little bit the particular of the boat and this banister here. I'm just using a dirty palette, as you can see here, so my colors are not 100% pure. And this is something that I recommend over and over, be you painting in watercolor or in oil paint. Just keep your palette quite dirty. That will help to bring everything together a little bit better. This is just the first layer of color, and I'm just adding the main colors of the painting. The blue on the boat line, the sand color, the color of the cabin, and so on and so forth. Just be mindful of following a little bit the picture as you go, just to understand the colors. Now let's work on our second layer. The painting is almost fully dry, so I can go on with a second layer. In this case, I like to add the first line of shadow, if you wanna call it like that, or the deeper part of the color, just repeating the same color of the base. So in this case, I'm adding depth to the boat by using the same cadmium red as we used before in the background. This would definitely create a bit of depth in your painting, but as well start outlining where the main shadows are going. And I repeat these strategies with all my colors, so you will see a deeper blue, you will see a deeper green, or a deeper yellow ochre where the sandy color is going. This helps very, very much with the next step, which will be adding the actual shadows. Feel free to stop this video and catch up with the painting. For uploading reasons, I had to speed it up a little bit. We're now adding the main shadows, and to do so, I'm using only my gray tint. Can be a cayenne gray or that gray tint that we used before. For the shadows, I tend to follow almost by the letter what our image will tell us. So be very careful to paint the shadows where they more or less go in the picture. This will help you very, very much in creating a little bit of a realism in your painting, and as well make everything come together quite nicely. Now let's talk about walls a little bit. Walls are made of bricks or stones, and they have, or they tend to have different colors different shapes, and so cast a different type of shadows. I really don't like painting every single brick as I see them on the page, on the reference photo, but I very much prefer just a more painterly feeling. To achieve this, I just dab a little bit of gray color mixed with some of my yellow ochre or cadmium yellow. And then on the top of that, just dots of darker gray, of brown, of darker red, and let them, while wet, to mix and mingle together, so to create this randomness of the bricks, shadows, and tints. That helps really, really much when you want to suggest a wall or have an organic feeling to some stones or some human made build. With the same gray color, I'm now adding shadows to the boat, to the body of the boat itself. Once again, the color is pretty dark, but as you can see from the background, the color is starting to lighten quite a bit. So I like to go through my shadows a couple of times in order to get that depth that I'm so looking for. Don't worry now if you make some mistakes. At the end of the day, this is your painting and you decide what to do. But it's always fun to try and experiment. I'm just now working the shadows here and there where they go, on the bricks, on the boat windows as well, and on the cliff on the back. I really hope you enjoyed this little demo, this tutorial. I don't know if calling a tutorial would give this video any description, but if you did, please consider to subscribe to my channel. This really helps very much in getting some sort of visibility to my little art adventure. And if you have painted this with me, please tag me and share this picture of an Instagram. You can find me looking for Irish farm art. And I'll see you very soon. Bye bye.